Chapter 1. The Twilight Drive. It was the start of Thanksgiving break, and I was driving home from school. It was getting dark unusually early, only 7 p.m., yet the sky was a deep, unsettling shade of black. The feeling of the day slipping away while I was still in traffic was always disheartening. The highway was clogged with students, each of us desperate to get home. Frustrated with the sluggish pace, I decided to take a detour through the country roads to escape the congestion. The highway turned into a rural road that meandered alongside it. The transition was a relief. It was a rare pleasure to drive without the constant need to switch lanes or contend with the endless line of brake lights. I set the cruise control and drifted through the countryside, passing through gentle hills and dark farmland. The lack of moonlight or stars made the journey feel eerie and isolated. The darkness seemed thicker here, more oppressive. With the road stretching endlessly before me and no other cars in sight, I began to feel uneasy. The fear of an unexpected deer jumping out or a hidden bend in the road gnawed at my nerves. I had been driving for about 20 minutes when the open fields gave way to dense forest. The tree canopy overhead completely swallowed any remaining light. I realized I hadn't seen another vehicle since I left the highway, which made me feel even more isolated. The shadows seemed to creep closer, making the darkness even more daunting. In the midst of this encroaching gloom, I decided it was time to switch on my headlights. Chapter 2. The Paralyzing Chill. I reached for the bright light switch with my left hand, while my right rested on the gear shift. As I tried to flip the switch, a cold, paralyzing fear gripped me. My blood turned to ice, and my stomach felt as though it had dropped to the floor. I was frozen in place, unable to move or think. The air around me grew heavy, and the car seemed to close in on me. Desperate to break the paralyzing dread, I forced myself to look into the rearview mirror. Every muscle in my body protested, but I managed to raise my eyes. The mirror revealed a sight that made my heart stop. There in the backseat was a young woman in a flowing dress. Her appearance was otherworldly, bathed in a faint, pallid light that didn't illuminate her surroundings but gave her a ghostly glow. Her wavy hair fell in untamed locks to her shoulders, and her freckled face was eerily expressionless. Her eyes were dull and vacant, staring straight ahead as if lost in a void. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. The jumble of thoughts in my head made it hard to form a coherent idea of what was happening. The only thing that managed to escape my lips was a trembling whisper. "Who are you?" As soon as the words left my mouth, her lifeless eyes shifted to meet mine. The intensity of her gaze was overwhelming, like she was peering straight into my soul. Chapter 3. The Unspoken Fear. A chilling silence filled the car, broken only by her haunting voice. "Am I scaring you?" she asked, her mouth barely moving. The question seemed to be carried by the wind, and her eyes remained fixed on me. My heart raced, and my brain struggled to keep up with the surreal situation. I wanted to answer, to tell her that her presence was indeed terrifying, but a different question suddenly surged through my mind. "Are you a ghost?" I managed to whisper. Her eyes remained unwavering, and her voice came again, almost as if it was part of the eerie ambience around me. "Does my presence frighten you?" she asked once more, her gaze still locked onto mine. I hesitated before answering. No. The silence returned, and I was left to grapple with my racing thoughts and the unsettling feeling her presence evoked. Chapter 4. The Unraveling Mystery. We continued to stare at each other, and as I met her gaze, my thoughts began to clear. "I'm afraid of you, but your presence doesn't scare me," I confessed. Her head tilted slightly, and though her expression remained unchanged, I felt a flicker of something, sadness, perhaps. I spoke softly. "Your presence here is oddly comforting. It confirms that there might be something beyond death. I don't understand it, but it's reassuring to know that something exists after." She continued to stare, her eyes void of emotion but intensely focused. I asked, "Is this what you looked like when you died?" Her response was a slow, almost imperceptible nod. I was overcome with a strange mixture of awe and pity. "You were beautiful," I said, noticing a brief flicker of sadness in her eyes before they returned to their empty state. The silence between us grew heavy as I waited for a response. Chapter 5. The Life-Saving Warning. Without a word, she lifted her hand and pointed ahead. "Watch where you're going," she said, her voice a whisper carried by the wind. The gesture was clear, and I followed her direction with my gaze. Ahead, I saw a sharp curve in the road, hidden by the dense forest. In a panic, I slammed on the brakes and jerked the steering wheel. The car skidded and spun uncontrollably, my tires losing traction. I fought to regain control, the car making a full 360-degree turn before skidding to a halt mere feet from a massive tree. Panting heavily, I clutched the steering wheel with white knuckles, my heart pounding as if I'd just run a marathon. I turned to look in the backseat, but the girl was gone. My initial reaction was to convince myself it had all been a dream, a figment of my exhausted imagination. After a few moments of catching my breath and expressing silent gratitude to whoever was watching over me, I restarted the car and cautiously drove back onto the road. Chapter 6. The Haunting Sign. With my right hand on the gear shift and my left reaching for the bright light switch, I clicked it on. The forest ahead was illuminated by my headlights, and a yellow road sign came into view. Caution, high crash zone. I chuckled nervously, relieved that I had narrowly avoided a disaster. As I got closer, I noticed something unusual. At the bottom of the sign, written in red paint, was a name, RIP to me and THA. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the girl's warning had saved my life. The eerie coincidence left me shaken but grateful. I drove away, my mind still reeling from the encounter, reflecting on the unsettling yet life-saving presence of Samantha. The road ahead seemed brighter, but the memory of that night and the haunting sign would linger with me for a long time.